The babysitter vanished at 9:42 p.m. No goodbye. No text message. No explanation. 1 minute, she was inside our house with my 7-year-old daughter, Ellie. The next minute, she was gone. Her car was still parked across the street. Her phone was sitting on our kitchen counter. And my daughter was standing alone in the living room, holding a stuffed rabbit and crying. At first, I thought something terrible had happened to Ellie. Then I thought something terrible had happened to the babysitter. But when I checked the security footage, I realized the truth was much worse. The babysitter hadn't vanished because she wanted to leave. She vanished because she found out something about my husband that he had been hiding from me for years. And the security camera captured every second. Welcome back to Calm Verdict Stories. If you enjoy stories about betrayal, family secrets, hidden truths, karma, and life-changing discoveries, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today's story is for anyone who has ever trusted the wrong person, and then discovered the truth was sitting in plain sight the entire time. My name is Maya. I was 32 years old when this happened. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 8 years. We had one daughter, Ellie, who was 7 at the time. Ellie was the kind of child who made friends everywhere. She loved animals, glitter, cartoons, and asking questions at the exact moment adults were trying to have serious conversations. She had a stuffed rabbit named Poppy that went everywhere with her. To school. To restaurants. To bed. And especially when she was nervous. Daniel was a good father in the way people could see. He showed up to school events when it was convenient. He posted photos on birthdays. He bought Ellie expensive gifts. He always looked proud when other people complimented her. But behind closed doors, he was different. Not cruel. Not loud. Just distant. He could sit in the same room as Ellie for hours and barely speak to her. He would stare at his phone during family dinners. He would get irritated when she asked too many questions. And he always seemed to have work emergencies whenever I needed help. At the time, I told myself he was stressed. Daniel worked in commercial property development. He had recently been promoted to a senior project manager role, which meant long hours, business dinners, and constant phone calls. I worked remotely as a graphic designer. Most of the childcare responsibilities fell on me, but I didn't mind. I loved being with Ellie. Still, every once in a while, I needed a break. That's why we hired Natalie. Natalie was 24. She was studying early childhood education, lived nearby, and had been recommended by one of Ellie's teachers. Ellie loved her immediately. Natalie would bring craft supplies, bake cookies with her, and somehow turn ordinary evenings into small adventures. She also had a calmness that I trusted. The first time she babysat, Ellie didn't even cry when Daniel and I left for dinner. That was unusual. Usually, Ellie clung to me when I went out. But with Natalie, she felt safe. Over the next 6 months, Natalie became part of our routine. She came over twice a month, sometimes more when Daniel had business events. She knew where the snacks were. She knew Ellie's bedtime routine. She knew Poppy had to be tucked in before Ellie would sleep. She also knew our house better than most people did. Including the security system. Daniel had installed cameras around the exterior of the house after someone broke into a car in our neighborhood. There was one at the front door, one by the driveway, one facing the backyard gate, and one inside the entryway. The inside camera made me uncomfortable at first. Daniel said it was for security. I believed him. But he always had a reason that sounded reasonable. That Friday night, Daniel told me he had an important client dinner across town. I had been invited to a colleague's gallery opening. It was the first event I had attended in months, and I was excited. Natalie arrived at 6:30. She brought Ellie a small bag of animal stickers and a new sketchbook. Ellie ran to her immediately. "Can we make a zoo?" she asked. Natalie laughed. "Only if I get to be the sleepy giraffe." Daniel kissed Ellie on the forehead, then looked at Natalie. "Bedtime at 9, he said. "No sugar after 8. And don't let her watch anything scary." Natalie nodded. Then Daniel looked at me. "Try not to stay out too late." I smiled. "I won't." At the time, I thought nothing of it. Later, I would replay that moment in my head 100 times. I left around 7 o'clock. The gallery was beautiful. There were paintings, music, wine, and people talking about things that had nothing to do with school lunches, laundry, or Daniel's work schedule. For 2 hours, I felt like myself again. Then, at 9:47 p.m., my phone rang. It was Natalie. I answered immediately. But there was no voice. Just breathing. Fast, shaky breathing. "Natalie?" I said. "Are you okay?" Then the call ended. I called back. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my coat and told my coworker I had to go. The drive home took 20 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. I called Daniel on the way. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then I tried Natalie one more time. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was parked across the street exactly where it had been when I left. The lights were off. The front door was unlocked. And the security camera light above the entryway was blinking. I ran inside. "Ellie?" I called. No answer. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Then I heard a small sound from the living room. Ellie was sitting on the floor in her pajamas, holding Poppy. Her face was wet with tears. "Mommy," she whispered. I dropped to my knees. "Where's Natalie?" Ellie looked toward the hallway. "She had to go away." "What do you mean?" "She said to stay here and lock the door." "Why?" Ellie shook her head. She was scared. I called the police. Then I called Daniel again. This time, he answered. "What?" he said, sounding annoyed. "Natalie is gone," I said. "Her car is here, her phone is inside, and Ellie says she got scared." There was a long silence. Then Daniel said, "I'm on my way." He arrived 40 minutes later. Not 15. Not 20. 40. And when he walked into the house, the first thing he asked was not whether Ellie was okay. It was not whether Natalie was safe. He looked at the security camera in the entryway. Then he asked, "Did you check the footage?" I stared at him. "The police are on their way," I said. He looked angry. Not worried. Angry. That was the first moment I felt something inside me shift. The officers arrived quickly. They searched the house, checked the yard, spoke to Ellie as gently as they could, and asked us both questions. Daniel kept insisting Natalie had probably left because of a personal emergency. He said young people were unreliable. He said she may have panicked over something small. But Natalie would never have left Ellie alone. Not without calling me. Not without explaining. The officer asked about the cameras. Daniel stepped forward too quickly. "The system has been glitchy," he said. "It might not have recorded anything." I looked at him. "How do you know?" He paused. "I mean, it glitches sometimes." The officer asked whether they could access the footage. Daniel said he would need to find the password. Again, too quickly. Again, something felt wrong. But I knew the password. Daniel had used the same password for everything for years. The name of the first street we lived on and a number. I logged into the system from my laptop. And there it was. Hours of footage. Not just from that night. From every camera. The officer asked me to start at 8:30 p.m. At first, everything looked normal. Natalie and Ellie were in the backyard, drawing with sidewalk chalk. Ellie was laughing. Natalie was filming a short video of her showing off a colorful chalk giraffe. Then, at 9:12 p.m., someone appeared at the backyard gate. A man. Tall. Dark jacket. Baseball cap. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't knock. He opened the gate with a key. Natalie saw him immediately. She stood up. Ellie was still drawing on the patio. The man walked toward Natalie and said something. There was no audio on the backyard camera, but Natalie's body language changed instantly. She stepped between him and Ellie. The man pulled something from his jacket pocket. Not a weapon. A photograph. Natalie looked at it. Then she looked toward the house. Then she took Ellie inside. The man followed them to the back door. That was where the footage became confusing. The indoor entryway camera showed Natalie rushing Ellie into the living room. She told her something, then locked the back door. The man appeared on the other side of the glass. He knocked. Natalie shook her head. Then he held up the photograph again. Natalie looked terrified. She picked up her phone. That must have been when she called me. Then, at 9:42 p.m., she unlocked the back door and stepped outside. She turned back toward Ellie, pointed toward the couch, and made a locking motion with her hands. Then she closed the door behind her. The man and Natalie disappeared from the camera's view. Ellie stayed on the couch exactly as Natalie told her to. I watched the footage with my hand over my mouth. The officer paused it. Do you recognize the man? He asked. I didn't. Then he turned to Daniel. Daniel's face had gone completely white. The officer asked him again. Do you recognize him? Daniel said no. But I knew he was lying. I had been married to him long enough to know every version of his lie. The tight jaw. The refusal to make eye contact. The way he started talking too much when no one had asked a question. He could be anyone, Daniel said. Maybe someone Natalie knows. Maybe an ex-boyfriend. The officer looked at him carefully. An ex-boyfriend who had a key to your backyard gate? Daniel said nothing. The police asked Daniel where he had been that night. He said he had been at a client dinner. They asked for the restaurant. He told them. They asked whether anyone could confirm he was there. He said yes. But when the officers asked him for the client's name, he hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. They asked us both to stay available for further questions. Then they left to search the area and begin looking for Natalie. Daniel barely spoke after that. He went upstairs and locked himself in the bedroom. I sat beside Ellie until she fell asleep. But I didn't sleep at all. At 2:14 a.m., I heard Daniel moving around downstairs. I came down quietly. He was standing in the kitchen, holding his phone. He didn't see me at first. Then I heard him whisper, she wasn't supposed to call her. My blood went cold. I stepped into the room. Who wasn't supposed to call me? Daniel turned around so fast he dropped his phone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You're imagining things." Who was that man? I don't know. Stop lying. His expression changed. The charming version of Aaron was gone. The worried husband version was gone. For the first time, I saw nothing on his face. No fear. No concern. Just calculation. Then he said, Natalie found something she wasn't supposed to find. I felt sick. What did she find? He looked toward the living room camera. Then back at me. You need to stop asking questions. I took a step back. Where is Natalie? I don't know. Who is that man? He didn't answer. I grabbed my phone and moved toward the front door. Daniel stepped in front of me. Don't call anyone yet. I stared at him. You have no right to tell me what to do. Maya, please. You don't understand what this could do to our family. I laughed once. Our family? He looked frustrated. Then he said, I made a mistake. What mistake? He sat down at the kitchen table. And slowly, the truth came out. Daniel had been using his position at work to help a business associate move money through fake renovation contracts. At first, he claimed he didn't know what was happening. Then he admitted he knew enough. Enough to look away. Enough to accept payments. Enough to tell himself it was temporary. The man in the backyard was named Victor Hale. He was Daniel's former business associate. And Natalie had found a folder in Daniel's home office earlier that week. A folder with copies of contracts, bank records, and messages. She had seen it while looking for printer paper for Ellie's drawing project. Natalie didn't understand everything in the folder, but she understood enough to know it was wrong. She told Daniel that she had seen it. Daniel panicked. He called Victor. Victor came to the house that night to talk to her. But Natalie had called me before he could convince her to stay quiet. That was why Daniel was so angry. Not because Natalie disappeared. Because she had left evidence. I looked at him. You let that man come to our house while our daughter was here? Daniel said, I didn't think he would scare her. You didn't think? He was supposed to just talk to Natalie. I grabbed my phone. Daniel reached for my arm. This time, I stepped away before he could touch me. You are done deciding what happens in this house, I said. Then I called the police. The officers came back within 15 minutes. This time, Daniel didn't try to explain everything away. He asked for a lawyer. They searched his office with a warrant later that morning. The folder was gone. But the security camera had recorded something else. At 8:56 p.m., before Natalie went outside, the indoor camera showed Daniel entering his office. He took a thick envelope from a desk drawer, placed it in a black bag, and carried it to the garage. Then, at 9:08 p.m., Victor entered through the backyard gate. At 9:12 p.m., he showed Natalie the photograph. And at 9:42 p.m., Natalie left with him. But the camera never stopped recording. At 9:51 p.m., Victor returned alone. He entered the garage through a side door. 3 minutes later, he came out carrying the black bag. Then he left through the backyard gate. The officers found a partial license plate from the driveway camera. They located Victor the next day. And they found Natalie. She was safe. Scared, exhausted, but safe. Victor had driven her to a motel outside town and tried to convince her that reporting anything would ruin her future. Natalie had refused to cooperate. When Victor left to deal with the documents, she used a hotel phone to call emergency services. She had been waiting for help when the police found her. The photograph Victor showed her was of her younger brother. He had used it to scare her into leaving the house quietly. That was the part that made me furious. Natalie had protected Ellie. She had followed Victor outside because she believed keeping him away from Ellie was safer than letting him into the house. She was 24 years old. She was scared. And she still protected my daughter. Daniel did not. Daniel protected himself. The investigation lasted months. Daniel lost his job. Victor faced serious legal consequences. The contracts, bank records, messages, and financial evidence were eventually recovered through multiple sources. Natalie's name was cleared completely. The school where she studied gave her support. Her future was not destroyed. In fact, after everything was over, she continued working with children. She told me she almost quit. But Ellie sent her a drawing. It was a picture of Natalie as a superhero giraffe with wings. At the bottom, Ellie had written, "Thank you for keeping me safe." Natalie framed it. As for Daniel, I filed for divorce. It was not easy. Nothing about it was easy. There were meetings, lawyers, custody discussions, and days when I felt like I was carrying the entire weight of our life alone. But I had the security footage. I had the truth. And I had finally stopped making excuses for someone who had spent years making excuses for himself. Daniel tried to apologize later. He said he had made bad choices. He said he never meant to put Ellie in danger. He said he loved us. Maybe part of him did. But love without responsibility is not love. It is selfishness wearing a familiar face. I told him that I hoped he would take responsibility for his life. But he would no longer be allowed to gamble with ours. A year later, Ellie and I moved into a smaller house near her school. Natalie still visited sometimes. Not as our babysitter at first. Just as a friend. Ellie would show her new drawings, and Natalie would bring art supplies. The security cameras remained on the house. Not because I lived in fear. But because I had learned something important. The truth is always there. Sometimes it is hidden in a folder. Sometimes it is buried in a lie. Sometimes it is waiting quietly on a screen, recording the moment someone thinks no one is watching. And sometimes, it is the person you trusted most who gives you the reason to finally look. Thank you for watching Calm Verdict Stories. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever discovered the truth about someone only because you paid attention to the details they thought you would ignore? Subscribe for more stories about betrayal, karma, family secrets, justice, boundaries, and life lessons. Until next time, stay alert, stay strong, and remember, the truth never stops recording.